The Journal of Jesse Smoke, page 14. October 11, 1837. Unable to write the last 2 days because of so much work about our small farm. Among other things, I had to take Napoleon to John Iron to get shod. We are not like those of our Cherokee nation, who are wealthy and have a Negro slave to assist us in their labors. Reverends Worcester and Butler have openly questioned slavery. I agree with their views, but many Cherokees cannot see what is wrong with slavery as long as the slaves are well treated and content. Note that our hens are very nervous. October 12, 1837. Many in our Indian nation have been to school here in New England. We have our own written language. I myself have even a small library, and some of the books are written in Cherokee. I have a pile of Reverend Worcester's tracts here. None of them are well written as Milton or Shakespeare. However, the passages from the Bible do read beautifully. These books and pamphlets deal with such things as proper behavior and findings in light of Christianity. These are some of their titles: 10 Commandments, and Poison Tree, and Sin in Reverence in the House of God, and Pray for Them which Persecute You. Translations of the Book of Jonah, Naaman and Gehazi, Patient and Joe, and Psalms 116. Troublesome Garden and Parents' Neglect of Their Children, Poor Sarah, I Am Christian, and the Bible. On one shelf in my room are my Morocco-bound Testament, Shakespeare and Milton, and other books of poetry. My hands have become so calloused and rough from the work I have constantly engaged in since returning to our farm that it's hard for me to hold a book in them. Much as I value education has given me, it was poor preparation for the labor of farming. October 13, 1837. Counted the chickens this morning. One of them is missing. I can ill afford to lose even a single one. Nothing else of note occurred today. No farmer worth his salt can survive without an almanac. So I rejoiced today when I received a package from Reverend Worcester. It contained a copy of the almanac prepared by him for 1838, printed with Cherokee on one page and English in the next. The Cherokee almanac contains the number of months in the year and their names, the months in each of the seasons, the number of days in each month, the names of the days in each week, the division of days into hours, minutes, and seconds, the uses of the almanac and the manner of using it, the visible eclipses in the present year, religious matter at the head of each calendar page, useful hints on agriculture, domestic economy, industry, etc. Reverend Worcester plans to publish many more books from the new press he has set up in the West. It is now 2 years since Reverend Worcester and his family departed from the Cherokee Nation. He left after the Georgia Guards seized the press that had once published our nation's newspaper. I think I would enjoy being a writer and a publisher of books, but I will not do it if it means I must betray or desert my people, as some have done. I do not mean Reverend Worcester, for he is not Indian, but a white man. I mean other Cherokees who have not stood by us, as has our chief, John Ross. October 14th, 1837. One of my friends from Creek Path Mission came by and spent 2 days. His name is John Cloud, but all call him Preacher San. San is Cherokee for John. Preacher San has never learned to speak English. He was a grown man when he came to the Creek Path, but he accepted the teachings of the Bible so strongly in his heart that he became a wandering evangelicist. He traveled through all 8 of the districts of our republic, spreading the word. The Bible was translated from Greek into Cherokee soon after the Sequoia gave our nation the syllabary in 1825. That translation was done by David Brown, whom I had never met. He died of one of the influenzas that prevailed at Creek Path from time to time. He died in September of 1829, the year before I arrived at Creek Path. Miss Delight Sargent of Paulette, Vermont, was my first teacher in the Creek Path. Her eyes filled with tears when she spoke of David Brown. She said that he was one of the most educated Indians ever, having gone to Andover to study Greek and Latin, and having devised his own way of writing Cherokee, which was put aside, of course, when Sequoia come up from his alphabet. Only one other Cherokee, she said, was ever more educated than David Brown. She has now married that man since his first wife died. She is now Miss Elias Bandeau. The preacher's son would laugh if he read what I just wrote. It proves the point that he made to me when I read his first entries in his journal. When I finished, he shook his head and asked who I was writing for. It was a good question, and it brought me up short. Was I doing it for Reverend Worcester? Was I writing for myself? Or was this for people I had never met? Anyone, I said. That made San smile. He said that anyone will not understand my story. He said that I must start at the beginning. I reached out a hand and put it on my shoulder. He could tell that his words had troubled me. Tell more stories if you feel, as you fill your talking leaves. At that you are good. Where should I start? I asked. At the beginning, San said. I will do that tomorrow. Once more, it has grown late. Tomorrow I shall start at the beginning, as we, Ani Yonega, see it. I shall begin with our own book of Genesis. October 15th, 1837. Our creation story. Back in the beginning, the old people tell me the earth was not here as it is now. All of the beings lived in the sky, and there was water where earth is now. So Beaver's grandson, Water Beetle, was sent to dive down to the bottom of the water. Water Beetle came up with mud on his feet. That mud was put on the back of Big Turtle, who floated in the water to hold it up. That mud became the lands of all the earth, surrounded by water. That mud was too soft and wet for anyone to walk on, so Great Turkey Buzzard came down and flew over the wet land, drying it with his wings. He dried the land, but he also shaped it. When Great Turkey Buzzard's wings came down, they made a valley, and when they lifted up, they made mountains. And that is how the land was made, all of these valleys and mountains and etc. Where the Ani Yonega live, there are the original children of the land. I remember what it was like before the earth was here. We are the ones to live between the above land and the below land. October 16th, 1837. I read my last entry to San. He thinks it's adequate. He shows how we feel that we are a part of this land, rightly ours. But he said maybe I should give a short history of how we came to this point where the white people, especially the Georgians, want us to leave. Since he must attend a sacramental meeting at Brainerd, he will not be able to respond to what I shall write, but I will try to get it right and as clear as possible. October 17th, 1837. Today I spent most of the day drawing in logs. Some are for firewood, and others split for more rail fencing. Being a mule, Napoleon had other ideas. I spent much of my time enticing him to move as I did engaging in any real work. Yet I know that he has a fondness for me. When, at least, I sat and put my head down in despair, he came over and nuzzled me. From then on, he worked twice as hard as a team of horses would. However, as I put him into the barn that evening, he kicked the side of his stall so hard that he broke one board and dislodged 3 others. Tonight I will try to tell another story. I shall relate the story of our dealings with the Yonagawi, our story with the white men. Back in the old days, our land included what is now Virginia and Kentucky, and North and South Carolina, and Georgia. We lived in villages, some big, some small. Every one of our towns had its own chief and its own council. We did not have one chief or king back then. Sometimes we made war, but mostly we were at peace. Then the Spanish came through. They were the first of the Yonigawi, the strange new people with pale faces. But they continued going and stayed not, leaving behind some dead and even some iron helmet or 2 of the short inherited by the fueler of his great-grandfather. Next were the Virginian settlers, who stayed. When they attacked our villages, we defeated them, and for more than 100 years the British traded with us. They also built forts. When they took some of our chiefs captive in one of those forts in 1759, it started a war. This time the British were too strong for us. They drove our people into the hills. Some of our chiefs signed a treaty giving up land, but it was not sufficient. More and more, the white settlers came in like a flood of water through a broken beaver dam. It was no longer the British, but the United States from whom we had to deal. Some of our leaders took up the hatchet. Tisu Ganesis of Dragging Canoe and his Chickamauga Cherokees did not give up the struggle, even after Kentucky was sold to white men. We had hoped, Dragging Canoe said, that the white men would not be willing to travel beyond the mountains. Now that hope is gone. The whole country, which the Cherokees and their fathers so long occupied, will be demanded, and the remnant of the Onondaga, once so great and formidable, will be compelled to seek refuge in some distant wilderness. Should we not, therefore, run all risks and incur all consequence, rather than submit to further laceration from of our country? Such treaties are all right for men who are too old to hunt or fight. As for me, I have my young warriors about me. We will have our land. Our long and bloody war ensued, ending in 1794 when peace was signed at Tellico Blockhouse. We, Cherokee, promised to never again make war with the United States. We now had a principal chief. We set up a capital of our nation at Nuachoa, holding on to a small part of our homeland where the new states of Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina came together. But the aim of the United States is to move all the Indians west of the great river, the Mississippi. Now, just as Dragging Canoe feared half a century ago, we are told that we must leave our homeland. So some of our people are giving in. They have gone to the Cherokee Agency in Calhoun, Tennessee, where the troops are gathering parties of Cherokee to move them west. October 18, 1837. It took me all evening to write last night's entry. It was going slow. I felt as if I were pushing a plow through a mule, or without a mule to pull it, and only finished one furrow from running into stumps. Although, in the writing of our history, I did not mention the many friends we have had among the white people. Many white men and women have married Cherokees and have thrown their lot in with us. I have before me a newspaper containing a resolution signed by hundreds of good Christians in Philadelphia who condemn the order of our removal west. Even General Wool, the soldier sent to oversee our removal, resigned his post rather than carry out the onerous and unfair duty assigned to him. Yet, even as I write this, another party of Cherokee emigres are ready to leave under the military escort from the Cherokee Agency at Calhoun, Tennessee. Too many things are happening. Who can untangle all these twisted threads? It's too much for me. I can write no further. I shall give up this task. November 3rd, 1837. The Fuhrer has seen 110 winters. It is not uncommon for people in our nation to enjoy a great old age, but he is the oldest man I know. Yet his hair is still thick and black, and his eyes are keen, and he walks as much as 20 miles each day, plants and hoes his own cornfield, and often leads the songs at ball dances, dancing all night about the fire. He has outlived 7 wives and 14 of his children by his own count. Despite his age, he is one of the first in our town to learn Sequoia's writing. He uses it to record the sacred formulas, powerful chants that can bring health or destroy an enemy. This, he feels, is the most worthy use of writing. His distrust of other ways of using it stems from the century of watching white men solemnly write down agreements upon their talking leaves. The Fuhrer has concluded that the white men take such pains to write down their promises to the Indians just to make certain that they will remember to break them all. Since his own age is almost 10 times that of my own, his wisdom is that much greater. We Indians believe that wisdom grows with age. Our old people are the ones who advise us. So I went to my great uncle for advice. I told him how I was discouraged I was about my journal. His response was to ask me to read it to him. I started to translate my words into Cherokee. He held one hand to his ear as I did and shook his head. "What is wrong?" I asked. Then he asked me if I had written my own words in Cherokee or English. "English," I replied. "I am ashamed to say that after my years of schooling, I can write easily only in English. If I try to write in our Cherokee syllabary, I move slowly as measuring a worm going up a stick." Then read it in English, the feeler said. I will not speak the language, but I have learned to understand it. This surprised me, but anyone who has contact with the feeler must grow to surprises. I did as he said. We both sat without saying anything for a long time. After I was done, he held the journal in my hands. As the feeler stared at it, I felt as if it were growing hot, and I thought it might burst, or it would burst into flames. It was probably my own nervousness. At last he spoke, telling me that I was doing might becoming a good thing, but I was using too many words. I asked, "What can I do?" Then again I waited, and the other speaks. He often pauses as does a deer about to enter a clearing. At first, looks about and sniffs the air before going further. At such pauses, a white man talks instead of listens. Then the deer turns and goes back into the forest. So I waited and I listened. Finally, the feeler cleared his throat and spoke. "Write more stories into your talking leaves," he said. "Do not worry. There will be plenty of stories for you to tell as the days go on." Then the feeler sighed deeply. Too many stories. I close my journal for the night, that I have resolved that I shall try to take his advice, and I will keep writing.